So in Matthew 22:14, it says that many are called, but few are chosen. And I've just been reflecting on this thought over the last week. What I used to think was that, you get this prophecy when you're younger about, you're going to do something great for God, or you have an encounter with God and he shows you what your future could look like. And we can easily just assume that that's a promise. I've come to realize I don't think that's the case. I think it's an offer of what it could look like if you are chosen. So that first part is like the calling. I remember when I was in either year 11 or 12 in Tennant Creek, Northern Territory, and this pioneer preacher who was in his 80s came to preach at my dad's church, and his name was Tommy Evans. He's also known as T.L. Evans. And he prophesied to the church that there was someone that was going to come out of that church and their ministry would take them overseas, and he went on into some details. And I remember thinking in the moment, oh gee, I wonder who that is. Anyway, we went home and Mum was getting lunch ready and Tommy was at our place for lunch. And he was sitting at the dining table and Mum said, I reckon that's Jason. And I kind of blew it off and went, yeah, right. And then he said, no, it is. And he went on to say a few other things. Before that moment, I felt like I was minding my own business. But then from that moment, I felt called. And it's marked me to this day, that moment, like the sense of call on my life. But, when you get a big word, it's usually followed by testing. And God doesn't just give you the word and then just, you come into your calling kind of thing. And that became quite evident to Joseph. He had the dreams and he told them to his brothers, and then everything just went pear-shaped for him. Partly because they weren't in a position to receive it, partly because it wasn't the right timing, and partly because he was just too arrogant, I suppose. But yeah, so many Christians, I feel, they just sit on the side of the road of life, waiting for Jesus to pass by and call them out of the crowd and go, this is my beloved who I'm well pleased, and enter into your global ministry. But they're not stewarding the gift that they have, and they're not doing the things along the way and passing the tests. I just want to read this scripture. In 1 Kings 18:41-44, it says, Then Elijah said to Ahab, Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink. And Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel. Then he bowed down to the ground and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, Go up now, look towards the sea. So he went up and looked and said, There is nothing. And 7 times he said, Go again. Then it came to pass the 7th time that he said, There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising out of the sea. So he said, Go up and say to Ahab, Prepare your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Then in 1 Kings 19:2-4 it says, Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, So let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he rose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. It seems to me that Elijah's servant, who was, kind of his apprentice, the one being groomed to take on his mantle when he retired, as it were, was just high maintenance. Elijah had to ask him 7 times to go back. The guy just didn't seem to get it. He should have just stayed at his post until he saw the cloud and then come back to Elijah and went, okay, we're good to go. And then the sad story to me is then Elijah goes to Beersheba and leaves his servant there. And as his servant watches Elijah leave to go into the wilderness, he's seeing his chance to be chosen walk out the door. And I just think that's such a sad story. In contrast to that, in 1 Kings 19:19-21, it says, So he departed from there Elijah was in the wilderness meeting with God and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was ploughing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he was with the 12th. Then Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle on him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Please let me kiss my father and mother, and then I will follow you." And he said to him, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" So Elisha turned back from him, took a yoke of oxen, slaughtered them, and boiled their flesh using the oxen's equipment, and gave it to the people. And they ate. Then he rose and followed Elijah and became his servant. The first thing Elisha did was he burnt the bridges to his past and his past income, and then he followed Elijah. And then in 2 Kings 2:1-2 it says, "And it came to pass, when the Lord was about to take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Then Elijah said to Elisha, 'Stay here, please, for the Lord has sent me on to Bethel.' But Elisha said, 'As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you.' So they went down to Bethel." Okay, so Elijah was about to do the same thing that he did to his first servant and leave him at Bethel. And Elisha said, "No way, I'm going to follow you, I'm going to stick to the calling." So it sounds like this was a test, and this is also a test for the first servant. And 3 times this happened to Elisha. 3 times they went to a different city, and Elijah wanted to leave him there. But Elisha said, "No, I will follow you." And the result of Elisha sticking to the calling, passing the tests, meant that he carried the mantle of Elijah. He became the one that took on the mantle. Some people are just like the first servant. Because they have been called, they sit by the road of life, waiting for Jesus to pass by and throw his mantle on them. These people, they just are entitled, don't really produce much. But we're called to pass the tests. You know, one of the things that we prayed in the prayer meeting, I think it might have been on Tuesday, was that it's always darkest before the dawn, and it's always darkest before hope dawns. It's in those times that they can be a time of testing, and they are the times when we want to just bail out. But we need to hold on to what we have seen in the light and remember it in the darkness. When there's no feeling of what we've seen in the light, we need to remember it in the darkness. And it can be hard when you don't have the feeling attached to it. There's a story in the New Testament that has a bit of a parallel, I feel. In Matthew 19:21-22, it says, Jesus said to him, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. It seems that Jesus extended the same invitation that Elijah extended to Elisha. Come follow me. What could have that guy's life looked like if he had followed Jesus? Elisha, he didn't sell all his stuff and give it to the poor, but he sacrificed his livelihood and gave it to the people, which is the parallel, I guess. He gave it all away. He was all in.